Right. So, hello, my name is Vasilios Kosmakos with the Summer Proctor Oral History Program, and who would have the pleasure of speaking with today?
Frank A. Garcia, paleontologist.
Fantastic. And so, Mr. Garcia, if you can kind of just give me a little bit about your background, right? Who are you? What exactly is it that you do? That type of stuff.
Background. Well, let's put it this way. When I was 8 years old, I started collecting fossils on the banks or the shores of Lake Okeechobee. And then, of course, I was living in Tampa Bay at the time, but I spent my summers down there with my grandfather in Lake Okeechobee. That's where I got started.
And
went back. Sir?
What year was this?
Oh, we're talking 1954, 55. I'm that old. And then I got back to where I lived in Tampa Bay, and I went down to the Hillsborough River, and I started collecting fossils there in the Hillsborough River in Tampa Bay, and found all kinds of really cool fossils. And then, of course, I'd kind of slowed down on the fossil collecting growing up. And then after high school, bingo, all of a sudden, that's it. My main interests were fossils. And I started going to Venice Beach, and I started going to Apollo Beach, and I found out it was dredged by the Army Corps of Engineers in Tampa Bay there in the early 60s. Finally, I found fossils all over Apollo Beach before they started building houses. And they were dredging it out of the bay, and we're talking about even artifacts that were paleo man. So we're talking about artifacts that were 10,000 years old out of Tampa Bay. And that was about the time, I guess, where during the Ice Age that the water was way, 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 way down. You can walk 30 miles from St. Pete Beach. You can walk 30 miles into the Gulf of Mexico before you reach the Gulf of Mexico. So that's what I was doing, finding all kinds of fossils there in Tampa Bay, there at Apollo Beach. And then I started going to Bone Valley phosphate mines. So I started doing a lot of collecting there in the Bone Valley region. And then I started scuba diving. That's when I really fell in love with all the waterways in Florida that I could dive and see. And I dove Silver Springs. I dove Silver River when it was legal. And some of the fossils there are just amazing. And what really amazed me more than anything else is the colony of monkeys I saw there at Silver Springs, which is the leftover from the monkeys they were using from the Tarzan movies. So it was a very close friend of mine that I dove a lot of Silver Springs and Silver River with. And he was he was the dive master of Sea Hunt, the TV they had on the show they had on television with, oh my gosh, what's his name? Lloyd Bridges, and who was Bo Bridges and Jeff Bridges' father. But it was Ben Wallers, the guy that I dove a lot with, and found out, and I learned a lot about Florida waterways. And also I did collecting in the Florida Barge Canal, where they tried to go all the way across Florida, and they didn't, of course. Found a lot of fossils there on the Barge Canal. So I dove the Peace River, I dove the Osceola, I dove the Steenahatchee, I dove the Ishtuckney, Withlacoochee River, the Peace River, I guess. I think I mentioned that. So it was just amazing, all the waterways that I saw, and the water tables that I saw, even at Leisey Shell Pit when they were digging. As soon as they hit water level, of course, they got a permission from the state where they can get a permit and they can have the pits dewatered while they were digging down. And then after they did all their digging and took all the shell that they needed from the shell pit, then they went ahead and shut the pumps off, and the water level went back up naturally. So
to kind of just backtrack a little bit, right? So tell me a little bit about the Florida Fossil Club, right? You're one of the founding members, right? And then discuss kind of your discovery of the Leisey Shell Pit, right? Why was that so significant?
Oh, froze up. Okay.
Sorry. So I'll repeat. If you can just discuss how you the Florida Fossil Club, right? So how you were one of the founding members, and also describe your discovery of the Leisey Shell Pit, right? Why was that such a significant discovery? And
sure.
What exactly did you find?
Absolutely. And started in I got the idea. Of course, the Leisey Shell Pit discovery was 1983, June 27th, 1983. And 3 years later, I sat down with DJ Bethay and Rudy Johnson, and we were sitting in a restaurant there in Bradenton. And I said, we ought to start a fossil club. So they were so excited about that. And we'll call it the Tampa Bay Fossil Club. So we put the wheels in motion and became the Tampa Bay Fossil Club. Rudy Johnson became president, and I didn't want to be president. I've been president of a lot of things and vice president in my lifetime. So even the Florida Paleontological Society, I was president of that for some time. But we started the Tampa Bay Fossil Club, and it was 1986. And we were sponsored by the Museum of Science and Industry in Tampa, which is closed now. But back then it was a big deal with the museum there. And so they let us have our meetings there. The second year, I even borrowed some of Thomas Jefferson's personal fossil collection, which a lot of people in America were amazed to find out that Thomas Jefferson was America's first vertebrate paleontologist. He wrote the first papers in paleontology in America. And so we borrowed some of his fossils because I knew Ted Deschler, who was the curator of the Philadelphia Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia, and he got to borrow the fossils for 30 days, brought them down to Florida, put them on display. And so, of course, our club became bigger and bigger and bigger. Now it's probably one of the bigger clubs in America today. I'm not associated with them anymore, basically, because I live up here in South Dakota now. But they're doing a mighty great job running that club. I think they got close to 1,000 members, I think. And they have an annual show. They have speakers monthly. I mean, they do a lot of things that I told them they should do when I first constructed the club, the framework that I copied from the Tampa Bay Mineral and Science Club that I had belonged to, which is belongs to the American Federation of Mineralogical Society, which I was inducted in 2000 in their Hall of Fame, along with Pete Larson and Neil Larson, who they're the dinosaur guys. So, but the club is a very popular club. You ought to join the club if you ever get a chance. Go down to Tampa Bay. They meet at the University of South Florida. They give out 2 scholarships a year. That was my idea also. And for worthy students there at the University of South Florida. So, and then of course, I moved up here. And so this is where I'm 75 years old now and spending the last of the quarter of my life up here. That way I can find some more fossils, different fossils. So of course I'm known for the mammals, and now up here is dinosaurs, Cretaceous. Even though I did spend from 1979 to recent, I did spend an awful lot of time collecting oreodonts, 3-toed horses, oreodonts like this, and 3-toed horses, and like this right here. Since 1979. It's a mural in the art. These are some of the items that I collected. Some of the Erna Ranch area in South Dakota. Saber cats. Isn't that cool? Turtles. Really cool stuff. Oreodont skeletons. And then, of course, my favorite is the Titanotheres. These are the big boys. These are the giant rhino-like animals that were here. So one of my favorite fossils anyway. A little bit of everything up here. And then, of course, when I did come up here and we opened up this museum, I wanted to make sure that we showed some of the agatized corals that I got in Tampa Bay. So, I mean, because agatized coral, about burn agates up here, it's about missing. And while we're here, I might as well show you the mural, the diorama we have of the Leisey discovery right here. And that's me when I discovered that site. June 27th, 1983, Christian Science Monitor article that they did. Sir?
I love that picture.
Yeah, that's a very iconic picture. It really is. And there's the wall. We transplanted it. So a lot of the fossils from that site, we transplanted here. The shells are from that site, transplanted here, and so forth. So it's real. A lot of people will say, well, that's fake. No, it's not. Then, of course, that's the horse that I dug up there at Leisey, the last great American horse, not related to the Spanish horse, because the Spanish brought their horses in after the horses died out at the end of the Ice Age. The Spanish brought them in the 16th century. This guy is 2 million years old, so he's a real all-American horse. And there's a mural. I think it's the finest mural in the United States. It's even bigger than La Brea, mural that I know of. It's over 214 animals we found. And every animal that you see drawn in that picture by artist Mike Manasco, a good friend of mine in Minnesota, every animal you see in that picture, we found their bones, their fossils.
That's incredible.
That is. That's when I was on the Today Show with Bryant Gumbo, and that's the Leisey family they were so nice and giving me the keys to the shell pit for 30 something years. Yes. And there's the plaque that they put up there at the Leisey Shell Pit. So I'm still alive and have my name in bronze. It's crazy. So, but then of course, these are some of the fossils we got at Leisey University. And then the biggest sloth ever found, I found it there. And the mammoths, earliest mammoths in North America. And I know not far from here in South Dakota in town, we have a place called the Mammoth Site, greatest mammoth site in the world. But the mammoths, they're only 100,000 years old. These are nearly 2 million. So these are the ancestors, earliest mammoths in North America. Then, of course, before I found Leisey, this is what I was doing, collecting fossils for the Smithsonian. See that dugong in there in the picture?
Mm-hmm.
And all the rhinos and this is all Pliocene, Miocene. So then, of course, there's what I collected for the Smithsonian, dugongs. And of course, behind me, we do have a mastodon from Michigan. But I'll go ahead and sit down now.
I mean, thank you for showing me all that. I mean, that was incredible. I mean, I've obviously seen a lot of your pictures you kind of post, but to see that, in real time is fantastic.
It really is. People love this place.
I mean, I love it.
It's a lot to see. And we're putting in more and more and more. And even what I want to stress on is not only fossils from Florida and the United States, from around the world. So we got some really fine fossils from France, Belgium, Morocco. In fact, I'm just acquiring now a skull of Papacetus, which is one of the first whales that walked on land. And the lower jaws here. So yeah, we have a little bit of everything. In fact, I'm going to put on display soon the remains of the biggest mammal that ever walked the planet was called Paraceratherium, giant rhino. So you got to wet my throat because the dryness up here is one thing. When you come up here, you're going to find out that the humidity is about 20% instead of Florida 100.
No, absolutely. So Leisey Shell Pit, right? You mentioned how you discovered about 30 brand new species of science within that shell pit.
There were 10 new animals that have been described, maybe even a little bit more.
Okay.
But I did find also a clam that was new to science. Roger Portell, University of Florida, wrote the paper up. And it's almost like an abalone type of freshwater clam. It's really cool. We found that at Leisey. But the important thing that they did find, though, we were digging Leisey. I brought it to the attention of Roger Portell. Dr. Webb was there at the site. Portell was a grad student then. Richard Hulbert, grad student also. Gary Morgan, who was a grad student. All of them got their PhDs. And what I did bring to their attention were clams, quahog clams that you see out there in the saltwater, the Bay Area, anywhere, quahog. Clams were shut. Around the clam, you had all kinds of broken seashells all over the place. But when you open up those clams, it was pure white sand with nothing else in there but pure white sand. And we thought that was just so bizarre. Why the outside of the clam is all broken seashells, but inside pure white sand. Anyway, so they did a double volume book, the University of Florida. I don't know if you've seen it. And it was done by 30 different scientists there in Gainesville and around the world, and they contributed to it. And it's the double volume 1 and 2 of the Leisey Shell Pit digging. The scientific descriptions of all the animals found there. I mean, it was just amazing. The work that they did was fabulous. And they do have that set there available at the University of Florida, probably if you ever want to see it or read it. So, but anyway, in one chapter in there, they talked about that clam. And they come to find out that during that particular time, there at Leisey, at 1.4 to 1.7 million years, was the reversal of the poles. And I personally think that it had something to do with the demise of a lot of the animals there at Leisey. That's why in that mural, if you saw in the mural in the background, which I should have pointed it out, a tsunami was coming in.
And,
the boom.
And what year is this, right? So this is
we're talking. This was 1980. This was 1983. But in '84, we did the official dig in '84,
No, I'm sorry.
83.
The geological era that you were mentioning, right?
Geological area was 1.4 to 1.7 million years. And
Okay.
they isolated a uranium isotope called strontium 90. And that's how it was Doug Jones who was in charge of that. And he still is, I think. Now he's one of the top people there at Gainesville at the museum. So it was Doug Jones. And that's the date that they basically come up with because of the uranium isotope.
Fascinating. Yeah. So would you mind kind of laying out the context of so roughly 10, 12,000 years ago, right? Florida, right? You had early man or you had Native American presence right on the land, right? Is there what change in the fossil record do you kind of see between the emergence of humans on the landscape and the correspondence of certain species, or the change in waterways, or geological sediments that you've kind of noticed, if you've noticed that?
What change?
Yeah, so like is there any correlation between human presence right on the landscape and the emergence or disappearance of certain
Yes.
species?
Yeah, I did see a lot of that in the Ish-Tuckney River.
Okay.
And that was before they made it a state park. And we're talking 1969, 1970, and I think in 71, 72 became a state park. And therefore, if it become a state park, you can't take anything out of that state park. It's illegal, and that's good. God, that's how they protect it. But before that, oh yeah, we found several sites there. My friend Ben Waller also did, who dove extensively there with Robert Allen, who was the son of Ross Allen, who had the big serpentarium there in Ocala. But anyway, so I started diving the Ish-Tuckney River with Larry Rotolo, another fellow Sicilian. And we dove the Ish-Tuckney, and one day we found a site there in the Ish-Tuckney River. We're talking about a river that's crystal clear and spring fed. It's what they call a high magnitude spring river. I'm sure you know what that is. And you have different springs that are off the side of the river boiling into making that river, making it flow, because you got the water. The water is coming out high magnitude. I mean, it's really gushing out from underwater. Very cold. We're talking 72 degrees year round. And that some of the sites we found there, we found definitely correlation of early man, paleo points. And I think you know what paleo means. Paleo is anything over 10,000 years old, Clovis points, Simpson points. And those points are shaped like a fish. That's a good way to describe that. Points and arrowheads that are shaped like Christmas trees, you'll find a lot all throughout Florida, and that's 1,000 to 3,000 years old. But when you get to these projectile points that are shaped like a fish, we're talking paleo, over 10,000. And I even found pieces of an adelanto there at that site. I found the pelvic bone, which is fossilized and petrified, of a horse, and you can see where early man carved on it. Donated that to the University of Florida. And so, yeah, throughout the years, and even Ben Waller, who was really into the Indian artifacts for years, dove a lot of the Santa Fe River, and some of the points, artifacts that he got out of there was just mind-boggling. I've seen, needles made from deer legs, and they're rat-tailed. And I mean, it's just the designs that the early man put on some of these things were just pretty incredible. And bolus balls, just like the bolus that they use and the gauchos use in Argentina. Early man in Florida was using the bolus before the gauchos here. So I thought that was pretty cool. And bolus do work, because I used them on my childhood cousins, and every time I used to chase them, I used to throw the bolus balls at them and wrap around their legs and knock them down. So, but Florida is tremendous for Indian artifacts. And as I said earlier, Dr. Webb and I sat down and we helped write this bill, isolated fossil bill, where we can go on state property and collect these fossils that are on state rivers and rivers, creeks, and streams, except a state park, of course, or a national park. And because a lot of these materials, you have no field data because you have current in these rivers. And so the artifacts roll down the river and you lose important data where they came from. So that's why they gave us the opportunity to collect the fossils and artifacts. Unfortunately, 2 years after the artifact community saw what I did, with a bill. And I've testified in the state Senate in Tallahassee, gave a very passionate speech about this, and it passed through. Senator Pat Frank was a friend of mine. She passed it through. And so the artifact community saw how well this was working. And so they started doing the same thing. Isolated bill, $5 a year permit. You disclose at the end of the year what you found. If the state wants a particular item and wants to see it, you have to show it to them. And it's called first refusal. And if they wanted to put it in their collection, then you give it to them. But unfortunately, after 2 years, 3 years, the artifact, how can I say, the regime, the artifact ruling regime in Tallahassee said that's enough, and they stopped it. So now it's totally illegal to pick up any Indian artifacts in any state property in Florida. Even if a little boy was down at the beach, which I think that's a stupid law, and you pick up a little Indian arrowhead, they could arrest that little boy or a tourist. I mean, say, come on. So you got to save this material. But anyway, that's the way it is right now. So
in your kind of, several decades of, of exploration, right, and all these kind of different bodies of water in Florida, what degradation have you seen in as your career kind of went on, right? So is there specific what degradation have you seen in terms of
degradation,
water quality, river kind of life that's present in the river, that type of thing?
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you, and I'm gonna tell you this right now, but I'm not gonna mention the names of the phosphate companies. Now you see where I'm going. I spent from 1970, 71 till 2002 or 3 or 4 looking in the phosphate properties. And I've been on just about all of them. And what I saw on some of these properties was just hideous. The way they were mining and the way they were dumping sludge, the way they were dumping chemicals back into these ponds. And even, I guess about 6 or 7 years ago, I don't know if you saw it in the news, there in Hillsborough County, one of the phosphate mines, a giant sinkhole opens up, and all of this stuff from the sludge and chemicals were going down into the aquifer. So I saw a lot of things going on in a lot of these phosphate mines that should have been shut down in a heartbeat. But since they have more money than sin, they can do whatever they want. And it's always been the American way. You got the money, you got the power to shut anything down. And even one of the phosphate chemical plants, because see, I was an asbestos worker, International Union, on the side, and I worked at a lot of these phosphate plants. And one of them that I worked in, Plant City, it just tells you what they're doing to the water quality there, because once you got to the Coronet phosphate chemical plant in Plant City, before you got to the complex, a mile away, you could see all the trees around that plant. And guess what? They were all dead. What does that tell you? What they're doing to the aquifer. So, and they continue to this day. And it's just not right.
So kind of going off kind of that kind of line questioning then, right? So what specific river, out of all the rivers you've kind of driven in, right, throughout the years, is there any specific river that comes to mind that you've kind of noticed a, tangible degradation, throughout, the years you've kind of been diving?
Peace River.
Peace River.
The Peace River. I noticed that it used to be a really, really pretty and clear years ago, and now I've noticed that. But of course, they're mining phosphate not far off the riverfront. One of the companies there in Hardy County, and then you've got and of course, I'm the one that kind of basically started this whole movement with the fossil collecting. There's thousands and thousands of people in these rivers, and they're all shoveling in the bottom of these rivers and sifting, putting them on the screens. There's shoveling on the banks of the river. So a lot of them are murking it all up. So, I mean, that's one of the rivers that I've seen. That's another river that I did see, the Ishtuckney. They used to allow people, you can take a drink or a sandwich with you when you floated down the Ishtuckney River. And people started throwing so much garbage in that river. I even noticed the bottom of the river right before they finally stop anybody from carrying anything to eat or drink when you floated down that river. It's like 4 or 5, 6 mile float. And they've basically just about dirtied that river up. And it's a shame. But, you know, this is what's going to happen when you have population, overpopulation. So, and you can't stop it. And you're not going to.
So kind of, I mean, so we've kind of put a lot. So you've kind of mentioned kind of the role of the phosphate industry quite a bit, right? Is there, you know, have you noticed is there anything that individuals specifically, yeah, and you kind of touch upon this, you know, when you're talking about the Peace River a little bit, right? What is the individual's role, right, in kind of causing kind of this water degradation, and most importantly, how do you think the individual can stop, you know, causing, you know, contributing to this issue, right? Whether that's through fossil hunting or whether it's through maybe runoff you've kind of seen.
Yeah, you're not going to stop it because they're, you know, you got 21 million people in Florida or close to it. You got 1,500 moving in every day in Florida, and you're just not going to stop it. And I mean, look what happened to the Hudson River in New York City. You want to go swimming in that river? No. When I was growing up in West Tampa and Tampa, Florida, in Hillsborough County, I first started collecting fossils there. I went to the Hillsborough River there, and the river looked really nice and clear at that time. We're talking when I was 12 years old. And then I dove in that river, I guess about 25, 30 years later, completely different because you got people moving in all over the place. So that they're putting fertilizers in their yards, and all that's flowing back into the river. And that's what's happening even in Tampa Bay. And even recently they had this big break in a levee there at Manatee County in Tampa Bay, where this huge holding pond of hundreds of millions of gallons of sludge and chemicals went into Tampa Bay. And what happened this past year? You saw it. You saw the news. So man is, you know, you're not going to stop it. Not unless you stop population. So it's inevitable, unfortunately. Wish we could stop it.
So kind of circling back, right, to your kind of role, right, as a, you know, as a paleontologist, right, describe kind of the type, so describe Florida, describe the way Florida looked 20,000 years ago, right? What was on the scene, right? How were species altering the ecosystem, right? And do you see any effects of kind of that modification today, right? So, for example, how have animals altered animals altered Florida's ecosystem, right? And you know, and how is that still relevant today, if you think there is some relevance?
Well, unfortunately, you know, back then, this is a pretty good glimpse right here. What it looked like in Tampa Bay. We had savanna-like, just like Africa. We had palm trees. We had cypress. We had oaks. A lot of the animals in there that you see in there, we still have today. They're not extinct. They're extant. We had swan. We had eagles. We had sharks, bull sharks. We had lemon sharks. We had barracuda. We had seal. Yes, we had seals back then, and we even had walrus in Tampa Bay. I mean, but a lot of the foliage and a lot of, we were really surprised. In fact, that's what Dr. Webb said. He was really surprised. The fossilized remains of everything that we found, you see there, was really surprised that it was just almost like it is today. Pretty amazing. But unfortunately, you know, again, man is the culprit. And unless you stop population, you know, eventually even the sea cows are going to finally come to an end. We should have sea cow in there somewhere because I did find manatee. I'll be darned. He didn't put a manatee in there, I don't think. Oh, yeah, there he is right there. There's a manatee right there. But yeah, and the man that I worked for at the University of, University of Howard in Washington, D.C., who's also a scientific fellow there at the Smithsonian, Dr. Darrell Domning. He's the Serenian or sea cow expert of the world. He told me that's inevitable, and eventually they're all going to be come to an end, all the sea cows in Florida. So
and why is that, right? So
because of man, the encroachment of the environment. That's what he's doing. He's poisoning it. Again, like I said, there's a lot of people using these fertilizers, and all these fertilizers are going into the water table and waterways, and then they wind up in the Tampa Bay. and in the oceans, and it's just a matter of time.
So dugongs, right, were super prevalent in Florida, right? You kind of see their bones everywhere, right? I mean,
Dugongs were everywhere in Florida at that time. They are today in Africa, but not Florida.
and
So you can find these off the coast of South America and Africa. The dugongs, yes, and dugongs are sea cows, but they're not manatees. A lot of people get them all mixed up because dugongs have tusks and manatees don't. Dugongs only have 3 or 4 teeth at the most. Manatees have an assortment of teeth. And manatees are really unique because they continue to make teeth all of their life. They produce them. They never stop. So.
And what caused the dugongs extinction within Florida? Why are they extinct?
No, they just moved out.
Okay.
They moved out. They might say they really didn't become extinct. They moved. They left. So it could have been maybe. Who knows? It could have been. Maybe it could have been these sea cows don't like cold water. So, and it was here. This represents the beginning of the ice age, which is called the Irvingtonian. It's two major divisions in the Pleistocene: the Rancho La Brean, which is named for Rancho La Brea tar pit, and then we have Irvingtonian out of Irvington, California, and that's the beginning of the ice age. So, which is about almost 2 million years ago. So, and this was an important discovery that I made because as Dr. Clayton Ray at the Smithsonian Institution, he said that this was like finding a new chapter in the history of life when I made this discovery. Why? Because very little fossil evidence was known from this time frame. It was a tiny snapshot, but what I discovered was just an amazing chapter. So that's my legacy.
That's incredible. And then so kind of circling back, right, to kind of the role of these kind of phosphate companies, right? In correlation with, so phosphate companies, right, are kind of dig all these huge pits, right, and
Right.
and allows you to find all these fossils, right? So so describe kind of the connection between phosphate mining and fossils, right? And then if you can, and then how does that kind of connect, right, with like the way with kind of their practices and the degradation of water systems based upon those practices?
Well, just like what I think I had touched before, what I've seen, it's when it really comes down to it, they're going to try their best in a sense to mine properly, responsibly. So from what I've seen, so how they get away with it, it's because they have more money than everybody else. That's why. And they'll continue until they've ruined the whole damn thing. So.
Yeah. And then would you kind of mind elaborating a little bit? So, you've kind of mentioned how the dugongs, right, and the manatees, right, were super kind of big discoveries, right? What else?
Right.
What else is of particular interest? Did you discover within the Leisey Shell Pit or within Florida more generally? What species? What ideas?
Well,
etc.
Well, I started in '79. I was chosen by Dr. Clayton Ray at the Smithsonian to be the chief investigator of all Florida phosphate mines. And the reason he did that is because I found this beautiful, big, huge, perfect whale skull with the lower mandibles, lower jaws attached to it. And I sent it to the Smithsonian as a present. And when they got that, they said, "Who in the heck is sending something like this?" And they collected it professionally. So they sent 2 people down to see me, to meet me, and that was Dr. Domney and Arnie Lewis, the chief collector at the Smithsonian. They came down to visit me, and they wanted to spend several days with me in the phosphate mines, and they saw how well and professionally I collected. Then they took all that information back, and the curator at the Smithsonian, Dr. Clayton Ray, sent me a letter asking me if I wanted to be, and I said, "Well, I have no degrees." And he said, "We're not interested in degrees, interested in results. And we've read about you for years." So they chose me to be the chief investigator of all Florida phosphate mines for marine and marine material and dugong material, and send that up there to DC. If you ever go to Washington, DC, go to the Natural History Building, check with Dave Bo Haska, and they'll give you a tour downstairs of all the stuff that I found. So I've discovered more dugong and more dolphins from Bone Valley and Wales than anybody else ever found in Bone Valley ever. But anyway, during that time, of course, I found several new species to science, and I'm proud to say I did find the remains of a pygmy dugong, very tiny one, and it was an adult. It wasn't a baby, and it was half the size of a dugong that we know of, which was really big. They're 12 feet long. This thing was only about 5 or 6 feet long, and full grown, tiny little thing. And eventually, they named it Danosiren Garcia after my namesake, and that was Daryl Domning that did that. But we can go on and on. I found all kinds of fossils that were terrestrial in the Bone Valley that were named for me. The first antelope, basically, Subantelope capra Garcia. Then I found the giraffe. But what I like about the giraffe that I found, and in fact, we're going to go pick up the cast this week, it's that Kyptoceras that you'll see it if you type in Frank Garcia, YouTube, Sunrise at Bone Valley. There's a 1-hour special about my life there. And you'll see Dr. Webb at the University of Florida handling that fantastic giraffe skull that I found in Bone Valley, Florida, in the phosphate mines. And it's the only skull that's ever been found. No other has ever been found. But what I like more than anything else is the relationship that Dr. S. David Webb and I had. As like he said in a personal letter he wrote to me, which I framed it, he says that you and I are paleontologists, and we've had the greatest relationship for 50 years with each other. And proof of that, he says, is when I named that giraffe that I found, that was brand new, he named it honoring all amateurs that love doing this fossils, and it's called Amatorum. And Amatorum means of the lovers. So he named it in honoring me and all amateurs that like fossils. And it's called Kyptoceras, which means kypto in Greek means bent, and ceres in Latin means horn. So it's Kyptoceras amatorum. So I thought that was really cool what he did, very profound. And I'm also going to start something that nobody else in America or anywhere in the world has. There should be a Hall of Fame for amateurs. Why not? Jesus Christ, I can't believe it. There's a Hall of Fame for all these professional PhDs, but we should have one for amateurs, and we're going to have one. And that artist that did all that beautiful mural, all those animals, he did the logo for me already. I'm going to put it on. You'll see it later on Facebook. I'll put it on later today. And we're going to start the Hall of Fame for amateurs here in America. And this is going to be the home city where it's going to start from. And the first inductee is going to be Mary Anning from England. And the second inductee will be Thomas Jefferson. And they were both amateurs. No PhDs are allowed in this exclusive club. And why not? Everybody, the PhDs talk about I forgot what they call it, the big organization worldwide, and they're always harping on each other. And in fact, they had me join this thing. I forget the darn thing, but it's worldwide. It's only like 3,000 members. And what was so interesting about that is I'm an amateur and all these people are PhDs. And so they inducted me into their society. And they wrote about the Leisey Shell Pit, what a great discovery it was. Never mentioned my name because I'm an amateur. But they did mention everybody from the University of Florida that worked on that project, but they never mentioned my name. 6 months later, they talk about this peccary skull that I donated to the University of Florida, this best one known in the world ever found, donated it to them, and they do a big article about it. And sure enough, never mentioned my name. So I bowed out of that society quietly. So, but the society that I want to have is I want to honor all amateurs. So
you kind of mentioned Bone Valley. The Bone Valley gets thrown out quite a bit, right? What exactly does that term mean, right? So give me a little bit of context.
Bone Valley.
Yeah.
Bone Valley, I had the pleasure to work with, of course, Dr. Webb and Don Kressinger. And he was a Bone Valley geologist from Mobile Phosphate Mine Company. And I got to meet him and know him quite well. And I learned an awful lot about Bone Valley, how they would dig down. And usually to find the phosphate rock that they wanted. Basically, what the phosphate rock was is pebbles, phosphate pebbles. And they would grind it up and they would add certain sulfur, like sulfur dioxide or sulfur to it. And they would make the finest fertilizers in the world, of course. But when they were doing so, they went through, I mean, the water tables that they went through was just amazing because I used to see it. 8 or 9 feet down, you have this beautiful water table, but they went down through it anyway. They didn't care. They were going after that phosphate rock. And they got into that phosphate rock. And then after they did that, they went further down and got into the bed pan, which wasn't further down. And it was called, the Hawthorne Formation, yellow limestone. And, but they just about ravaged all of Polk County and just about ravaged most of Hardy County. And it's really a shame. You know, of course, they do have reclamation projects, but how can you really make something beautiful that's already been destroyed? So that's the only sad part about that. Sure, we got a lot of prehistoric information from the digging and the phosphate mines, which I had permission for years for many of these companies until recently. One of the companies, they didn't even reply to the letters that my bosses at the Smithsonian wrote for me to go in there and continue investigating, as they let me do for a long time. And this sole company now, because they bought all the other companies out, they just disregarded any of our letters, never replied any of the letters to the Smithsonian. So what does that tell you? The National Museum in the United States didn't even have the courtesy to have a reply from any of these phosphate companies. Phosphate companies that want to reply. So what does that tell you? Disrespect. So they have their agenda. But unfortunately, you know, they destroyed an awful lot of properties. So, and now they're digging near some of the rivers, and you can't stop them. They just have more money than the people that are trying to stop them. So, sadly.
So why is the formation called Bone Valley, though?
It's called Bone Valley because the formation, the geologists gave it that because when they got into the Bone Valley where the pebbles were, they would find bones in them, fossils in there. So they called it Bone Valley Formation.
And then if you can kind of just circle back and discuss, so you've mentioned water tables quite a bit, right? Why is that significant in the grand scheme of things, right? And how, and if you can kind of just describe kind of, you know, a little bit more about what the phosphate company kind of does, right? So they essentially dig past these water tables is what you're saying, or?
Yeah, they go down. They don't go down to the aquifer. They're not supposed to.
Okay.
But they go, but you know, there is a water table down. I've seen it anywhere between 6 feet, 8 feet, 9 or 10 foot. And I mean, and these are really nice, what you call spring water, sulfur water, but it's spring water. But it's not sulfur water where you can drink it and it'll kill you. No, because I've drank it before. I've been out into the phosphate mines where it's summertime. It's been 100 degrees out there. The humidity is up there, way on up there. And a lot of people never went out there, really collectors did, because they didn't know how to do it. And I went out there because when I got hot, I got in the water, just like a dog. Cooled my body temperature down, but you could see a little higher up than from what I was collecting fossils, a little higher. You could see the water, the spring water coming right out of the ground, right out of the rock up there. And I would drink that. It's cold sulfur water. And I drank it. So, but they went through all of that.
So, and just so I understand, and so the viewers, what is the difference between a water table and an aquifer?
Well, the aquifer is, I guess the aquifer is where you have this big giant channel of great cold, clear drinking water. And that's down below the Hawthorne Formation.
Okay.
You know, I'm not really like I can say, I'm not a learned geologist. From what I learned on my own. But the aquifer is way on down below the Hawthorne Formation, and that's a very valuable and important water system we have in Florida. Now, way on above it, the groundwater, yeah, there was still clear drinking water there. You know, 6 or 8 or 10 feet down, or even 12 feet down, I've seen good drinking clear water come out of that level. So there were 2 levels there, but the aquifer is the main supply channel of water for all over Florida, the aquifer. So
Interesting. So I think that's as many questions as I have, unless there's anything more you want to add, Mr. Garcia.
Well, one of the main things is I started the Tampa Bay Fossil Club is that where we can find out more information from discovery. And like I told somebody earlier, we have all these pieces of puzzle, and every time you find an important puzzle, you put it down and it connects to another piece, and you just keep doing that until finally, eventually, you can have a picture from all of these pieces of the puzzle, and it'll give us a pretty good idea of what it was like in prehistoric times, because we have no snapshots, we have no videotapes, but we do have the fossils. And the fossils are great storytellers. And if you get a chance, watch that PBS special, that 1 hour special, Frank Garcia, Sunrise of Bone Valley, YouTube. And it pretty well, they did a pretty good job doing what I did my whole lifetime. And you'll see me diving in Silver River, Silver Springs. You'll see me in the phosphate mines digging. You'll see me the Leisey Shell Pit. You'll see me interviewed at the Smithsonian. So it's a great addition to what you're doing too, and you'll find out more information.
Great.
But I do this because I love it.
Absolutely.
So,
and I guess the best way to end this off, right? What message you have for any aspiring paleontologists, children are looking at this, what message do you have for the world, essentially, to kind of leave off?
Share. That's my message, because that's what I've done all of my entire life. As I had mentioned earlier, I mean, there's a lot of fossil sites that I have found, and I've shared it with everyone. Even when I discovered the Leisey Shell Pit, and this is a fact which I've written in my book, which I'm going to publish at the end of the year, about my discovery at Leisey. But when I discovered Leisey Shell Pit, I looked up that day and I saw that wall, and I saw all of these, all of those fossils up there. Good grief. How can I keep that to myself? So the first thing I did as a responsible person in Florida, which everybody has a responsibility, and my responsibility is to report it. And so I did, to Dr. Webb that day at the University of Florida. And he told me this. He said, well, I'm not knocking him down. Absolutely not. He's a great guy. He said, well, we're really interested in Bone Valley phosphate fossils instead of shell pit fossils. I said, okay, not a problem. So the next day I went ahead and gathered 18, 19 of my best friends, and we dug Leisey for all summer long. One of the grad students there at the University of Florida came down several months later to my house in Riverview, where I lived, Dr. Gary Morgan, before he became a doctor. And he said, I want to see what you've been digging. I heard a lot about it. Okay, so he took him back to my yard, opened my shed, and when he walked in that shed, he saw what he saw. He says, my God, he says, I see new species of animals to science. So that's where I'm getting at. I wasn't afraid. I'm not the kind of person that's going to go out and want to sell everything that I find. No. The important fossils I donate, the replicas that I have, sure, I'll sell to teachers, to people, to get them excited about fossils. But the main thing is share. Don't be afraid to share, because if all of us did that, we'd have a better picture of what's going on. So